When I had decided to take my life, my best friend beat me to it. Reddit confessions, the most upsetting confessions on the internet. For some backstory, my dad, 44 years old, randomly collapsed back in November of 2017 when I was 15 and he was 39. He ended up having a 17-minute long seizure, bit through his tongue and went blue. He was dead with his heart not beating while foaming at the mouth until the ambulance crew resuscitated him. When this happened, I leapt forward to hug him, crying, just glad he hadn't gone yet. But he forgot who I was, obviously from a lack of oxygen and confusion from the seizure, so he pushed me away. He regained memory of I was his daughter a few hours later but couldn't actually remember anything about me, so kept his distance for 2 more days until his memory fully came back. Since then he has been diagnosed with a severe form of epilepsy which literally destroys his brain with each seizure, as well as a shadow on his brain that is getting bigger over time. Since then he's had to be resuscitated once more and has come close a few other occasions. He has multiple seizures a day, both petit mal, absent-minded seizures, and grand mal, full-body seizures, and his memory will never be the same, even forgetting simple tasks like making a coffee. I've become his full-time carer, which I wouldn't change for the world. He's my best friend and I love him more than anything. I've always had severe anxiety and depression which was worsened by all of this, and I have been diagnosed with PTSD because of the trauma it's caused me, but I really don't care. I just want my old man to be okay and that's all I care about. Fast forward to today, I saw a post on Facebook from an EMT about how amazing ambulance crews are and how traumatic their jobs are, as well as how their job sticks with them. The story was from an amazing man whose first job was a 6-year-old who went into cardiac arrest but unfortunately, rest his soul, never made it, and he explained how his mother screamed and how he'll never forget it. I shared this post, sharing my own experience when the first event happened and how nice the ambulance crew was. They literally had tears in their eyes while watching me scream as I held his lifeless body in my lap, and I could see the desperateness and anguish on their faces when he pushed me away as I held him when they did bring him back. My dad saw my post and commented, apologizing for hurting me. This broke my fucking heart because I would never and have never thought he hurt me. I was upset and traumatized by the fact I watched my best friend die in my lap, and I've been traumatized by the lasting effects, how he's not able to do what he used to, and the seizure is not by the man who brought me into this world and raised me as an autistic child with a lot of mental conditions without a diagnosis, not knowing what was wrong with me but accepting and caring for me. I wasn't an easy child and that man means everything to me. I feel absolutely awful and guilty that my trauma is hurting my dad. He's blaming himself and always has. He's always pushing me to do things, go out with people and to live a normal life without me worrying he'll die at any given moment, but I can't. The PTSD is rooted very deep and my anxiety feeds it like lighter fluid on a fire. He sees how much it's affected me and how restricted I am. I refuse to do anything if I can't get back to my dad within a half-an-hour window. But I don't want to go out and do things, I just want to be with him and make sure he's okay. He is my world and I don't know what I'd do without him. Seeing him apologize for something out of his control and knowing he's being affected by the fact I've got trauma because of him breaks my heart, because while it's not technically false, I'd never ever blame him, and I just started sobbing when I read his comment talking about how he's hurt me more than anyone ever could and how he's sorry for the hurt he's caused me. Actual cuts. I'm glad he's still here. I'd do anything for him. I feel so much guilt and just plain awful talking about my trauma, knowing he feels responsible, and even worse knowing something I posted to praise EMTS has in turn made my dad feel worse about something he can't control. I, female 14, am living with my mother, my brother and my mother's fiancé, male 61. Ever since around 2017 to 2018, I don't really remember when it started, my mother's fiancé has molested me and gave me a lot of trauma. Let me just say that since February 2021 he has not touched me, so there is no concern that this has continued. But recently he has tried to talk to me and I really wanted to just forget what happened to me, even though every time I see him it just brings up the same feelings that I felt when he was molesting and sexually abusing me. He began with sexual comments on how I would look, and every time I looked uncomfortable he would say that he was joking. Reminder that I was only 10 to 11, so I didn't really know that it was bad that he was doing this, so please don't blame me for not telling my mother. Next he would give me his phone to play games on it, etc, etc. I learned that that's a tactic used by pedophiles to make their victims feel like they owe them something. So whenever I would be playing on his phone, he would climb on top of me and proceed to dry hump me and say that he was playing with me. By the way, the dry humping was him taking out his pee-pee and just dry fucking me basically. He wasn't raping me, I will say that. But he was rubbing his penis against my ass or lady parts, trying to imitate sex, if you know what I mean. He would also walk around naked near me. But as soon as he would hear my mother or my brother walking around or coming close to the room or so, he would quickly put on underwear or something. I also remember him and me wrestling when I was younger. Whenever he would pick me up, he would grab in between my legs and pick me up by either grabbing onto my ass or my lady parts. He has shaked his pee-pee in front of me, rubbed his penis against me and much more. I was sleeping one time and I woke up from having a nightmare. My mother, not wanting to be late for work in the morning, sent him into my room to stay with me for the night. I was around 11 here. I woke up to him full on kissing me on my mouth and me squeezing and touching his penis. I took away my hand but he tried to put it back. I turned my whole body the other way and he started grabbing my ass and trying to put my hand back again. I then pretended to wake up and I said that I needed to go to the bathroom. I then spent a whole 10 minutes crying in the bathroom and I didn't do anything with my right hand for a week straight because I didn't feel clean. I remember telling him that he can go back to his room and I didn't need him in my room anymore and that I was fine. In the morning he came into the kitchen while I was eating breakfast and he told me that he really enjoyed last night and he hopes that we could do it again sometime. Sometimes I would have an early night and take a few naps before I would actually go to sleep. So my mother would send him up to check on me every hour just to make sure that I was okay. Me being half asleep and fully aware what was going on, while he was thinking I was asleep, he would always make out with me while I was asleep. Those are just a few things that he has done. I have told my mother about this on February of last year and he hasn't done anything since. We officially reported him to the police, but on December 23rd, the police deemed it as a false accusation. My mother already was on the fence about what happened to me, and in mid-July when I had a fight with her I brought up her not believing me and she said that she believes both of us. He still lives with us and I recently asked for the key to my door. My mother was suspicious but she still gave me it because I told her that it was just for when I sleep or when I'm changing or for when there's a draft in the room. But really I just don't want him to walk into my room. I am constantly feeling uncomfortable walking around in shorts just in case he ends up walking into the room that I am in. I just want to feel comfortable in my own skin again. When I was in high school I purposely got my girlfriend, now wife, pregnant. We were 17 and in love when our son was born. We had practiced safe sex and she was on birth control and we used condoms. I quit school to work at the steel mill with my dad and provide for my family. At 18 I asked her to marry me and she said yes, and we've been together ever since, 12 years ago now, and have 3 children together. But what she didn't know until recently is that I poked a hole in the condom. She was the most beautiful girl I'd ever met and I wanted to be with her forever, and in my fucked up teenage head poking a hole in the condom was the way to ensure she'd be in my life forever. Years later I realized how shitty that was, especially since it worked, so I told her the truth. She laughed and said, I wasn't ever on birth control. I lied. Then we both laughed. I guess we trapped each other and we're both shitty people. God, I love her. So it's Suicide Prevention Awareness Month and I'm not sure if anyone will be reading this, but figured I would share in case it could help anyone. 5 years ago when I was at my then lowest and resigned to just checking myself off as a statistic as just another veteran suicide. I will admit that at first I felt relieved at first and finally got good sleep that night. Coincidentally, I want to say it was the very next day I woke up to a million missed calls, texts, and Facebook messages to find out my best friend took his life the night before. Almost immediately my world shattered. When I lived through the aftermath and fallout of it, the thoughts and prospect of carrying it out myself vanished almost immediately when I saw how much pain it put into the world. My biggest regrets are I don't think either one of us knew how much the other was hurting. I still cry and have nightmares every week, but I'm finally starting to be able to leave the house again. There was a time in secondary school, middle school through till high school, where I, 22M, was relentlessly picked on for being a fat kid, and for my looks, and afterwards just for even existing when I eventually managed to lose the weight. I had very few friends, who were often not in my house, class group, so I'd rarely get to see them, and I was often surrounded by people who'd barely acknowledge my existence at the best of times, and would just remind me of how low I was on the food chain at the worst of times. I'd been punched, kicked, pinched, called names, taken photos of to have shared around, and just made miserable. People always say school years are supposed to be the best years of your life, but I can confidently say I don't miss it one bit. One of my bullies, Ben, would pretty much constantly find any excuse to make fun of my face, or my teeth, which I'm conscious about to this day. I don't think I've smiled in front of anyone since I was 12, starting with just stupid names like Rabbit, etc. Of course when that annoyed me he'd escalate, kick my chair, trip me up, and tug on my hair. Then that led to pushing and kicking, and if I retaliated physically, He'd have at least 3 or 4 others with him to back him up and beat me down. I wasn't a big kid back then, and I was a late bloomer. Eventually all the years of bullying and lack of help got to me, and I just fell into a depressive spiral. My grades slipped, I stopped caring about the course of my life, I'd often cry myself to sleep, and then began to plot suicide. I'd come very close to taking my own life at 16, but luckily I never went through with it. About 2 to 3 years back, I'd heard from one of my good friends, whose mother is friends with Ben's, that Ben was dead. He'd been in a nightclub just outside London, had gotten drunk, and got into a fight. He'd been punched once and knocked out, and then presumably hit his head on the concrete ground, before later dying in hospital. My friend's family, and several others from my old school had decided to get together to pay their respects etc., and somehow I'd wound up getting an invite too. I made up some excuse at the time about not feeling well. I didn't feel an ounce of grievance that the guy died. I felt fucking amazing. I just constantly thought about how he'd likely never changed as an adult, and eventually wound up picking a fight with the wrong guy and gotten fucked up. And everyone around me was talking him up as if he was some angel who'd never hurt a soul, and was just some tragic victim. The other night I kept thinking that I'd spit on his grave, if I had the chance. I'm just wondering if my childhood's turned me into a bitter person, who just can't let go of his anger. It's been years, and the guy's dead, but I still can't let it go. I know he was someone's son, or brother, or friend, but I don't give a damn about how they feel. I was just happy he died, and it makes me feel like a terrible person. Well, that's all for the videos guys. I hope you learned something and enjoyed it. Have an amazing day.